Welcome to another episode of Commending and Contending, a podcast about how the gospel of Jesus encourages us to live our lives and use our words to commend and contend for Jesus and his gospel. I'm your host, Jonathan Holt, and joining me today is Hannah Vella. G'day, Hannah.
Hey, Jonathan.
Where has God planted you, Hannah?
I live in Canberra. I have a husband and three children. I like to say I wear four hats. I work as a primary school teacher in a local public primary school for a few days a week. I volunteer for my local church, which I love, and I help another organization called Canberra Christian Conventions do some work. I work as a volunteer for them. And my final and important job is to love my husband and my children and to help the household continue on from day to day. And so I share my time between those four things from week to week.
And how has God been encouraging you recently?
In many, many ways, but in particular, recently on Good Friday, a friend of mine took the Lord's Supper for the first time. It was kind of an interesting moment because we were inside the room where we put all the toddlers and their parents, and so we were surrounded by toys making interesting noises and children babbling away. And she said that she had put her faith in Jesus. And so together we remembered his death and resurrection and looked forward to his coming. And it was really a good moment together. She became a Christian in an interesting way. A friend of hers who was a Christian, she had been quite a strong atheist until this time. And a friend of hers who is a Christian had just given her lots of Christian books over the years. And she just put them on the shelf and they were collecting dust, as she says, and not read any of them and had really no intention of doing so. But she was going overseas with her family and she thought that it was possible that she would get bored on the long flight. And so she packed a few books and she did grab one off the spirituals shelf that she had created. And it turned out she did get bored on the plane. And so she opened up the book that she'd been given, and it turned out it was one of the Gospels. And so she read that Gospel from cover to cover and got to the end. And she says she just felt like she had no choice but to believe that this was true. And so she became a Christian somewhere between our country and another, just by God using the work of one of her friends.
That's such an encouraging story, and what a lovely reminder that God is at work often behind the scenes of the sort of things we're trying to do to show people Jesus and introduce them to the gospel.
Yeah, it reminded me that God is the evangelist. He's relentlessly pursuing his people. He is doing all the work, and we just get to join in on that. We get to imitate him, and I don't know about you, but I've given my friends books, and I know they're sitting on shelves collecting dust. But God might choose to use just that book one day to be the thing that helps someone to come to understand and meet Jesus for the first time. What a great thing.
The Gospel Coalition Australia is made possible by the generous donations of people just like you. Regular donations keep our website free and full of fabulous resources. If you go to our website, you can use the green Give button in the top right-hand corner and join the group of people bringing the gospel to Australia. Hannah, one of the things that often takes up time in churches but gets overlooked is the area of admin, just all the stuff in the background that goes on to make it possible for churches to keep humming along, doing the things they're meant to be doing. And yet, one of the gifts in the New Testament is the gift of administration. Now, seems like you might have the gift of administration. What is it like to be someone who is just loves and is good at admin?
I think I'm good and really bad at admin, depending on which situation or what day of the week it is. But I do love helping my church. In particular, I look after the safe ministry at my church. I go to quite a big church, and so we have just over 250 volunteers. And so the safe ministry job at our church is pretty big. And so it's my job to keep that humming along and making sure things get done that need to be done.
This whole area of safe ministry really has grown and grown in the life of our churches, and really important that I think it has, and we've taken it on board. But I do often get the feeling that not everybody loves it, not everybody's welcoming it. What's that like for you to have to respond to people who don't want to get on board and don't see why this thing is needed?
Yeah, it's challenging, isn't it? Because it feels like yet another hoop you've got to go through. All you want to do is serve a cup of coffee at church on a Sunday, and now there's this annoying admin lady telling you you've got to do safe ministry training and fill in this form, and you're not even going to see any children. And so it is challenging. I think it's important for us to remember that safe ministry is actually bigger than what we might think it is. And so often we think safe ministry is about stopping perpetrators from sexually abusing children in our church. And of course, we definitely want to be doing that. And we definitely think that's important. And of course, that's a part of what safe ministry is about. But safe ministry is quite a bit bigger than that. Being a safe church is not just about stopping sexual abuse, but also making sure that we are not harming people in a number of other ways, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's not just about children. I really like in the ACT, we have a screening process with the government, and the government has chosen to call it a working with vulnerable people card, whereas other jurisdictions have chosen to call it a working with children check. I like the ACT government approach because it helps us remember it's not just children who are vulnerable to abuse. And so there are disabled people in our midst, there are elderly people in our midst, there are people who are suffering violence, there are people who've lost their jobs. There's all sorts of reasons why someone might be vulnerable, and we want to love them and care for them well. So safe ministry is not just about one form of abuse. It's not just about children, and um, it's not just about us stopping volunteers from doing it, but also helping us to be aware of the signs of people being harmed so that we can report it. That harm might not even be happening in our church. That might be happening in the home or in a school or somewhere else. But we really want to be aware of when someone is being harmed so that we can take the right action to care for them.
It does start to sound like how we do something like safe ministry and even the admin behind safe ministry can be a way to commend the gospel. Often it feels like there's this long gap between admin and commending the gospel, but it sounds to me like you're saying they're a lot closer than maybe we've been imagining.
Definitely. I think I've seen that when we are not safe, the damage to the gospel is horrific and catastrophic in many ways. And it's not just the perpetrator and the victim that that happens to, but that the fallout of harm is extensive and can be far reaching to a lot of people and to a lot of time. It can go on for many, many years. And so the damage of harm is extensive. On the flip side, when we are safe, when we do love people like Jesus loved us, we can represent him so well that people can meet him through us and can put their faith in him for the first time, or again, be reassured of Jesus' love for them in the way that we treat them. It's such an opportunity for us to love one another.
Like it's a surprising angle to think about administration as a place where we put up the scaffolds for the kind of safety and faithfulness we long for and long to exhibit.
Yeah.
So we need that. There's a gift, says Paul, in administration, and that our churches therefore need that gift, and
Yes.
we ought to pursue and do it excellently wherever possible.
And that it's a way of love. Administration is actually loving people.
Mm,
Like it feels like paperwork and it feels monotonous and it feels challenging, but actually it is the way that we create loving communities where
mm,
people can meet Jesus. And
yeah,
without it, we can accidentally become very unloving
yeah.
in very quickly.
And I guess we probably want to give a shout out to all the people who are listening who are safe ministry coordinators at their churches, like you are, or perhaps at their school, or doing safe ministry for some other Christian parachurch organization, feeling the grind of all the admin
Mm,
that goes on in the background, but to be assured that this is good and important and something that commends the gospel. Though, if you could kind of just have a little word in the ear of the reluctant church member, on behalf of maybe other safe ministry coordinators elsewhere, what would you like regular church members to know and understand about safe ministry?
yeah, to remember that we're not accusing you of being unsafe, but what we're inviting you to do is come in and get trained and get on board with being a loving church. And we're going to do that together. And so we want to do all the same training so that we're all on the same page. Yes, it takes time. It is only a short amount of time, but we want you to devote that time. Do it quickly so that your safe ministry coordinator can tick you off and move on, and do it because you love the people you want to serve.
It is a wonderful opportunity to serve people, I think,
Mm,
actually embracing warmly, not reluctantly,
mm.
what it might look like for us to see God as the source of safety and to emulate and imitate his safety in our churches. Hannah, is there a resource at the Gospel Coalition Australia website you'd like to recommend to us?
Yeah, there was one recently about deliberately doing less, which was helpful for me when life can get a little full. So I'd recommend looking that one up. But I wouldn't go past. There's a resource by Rory Shiner on the resurrection. His teaching, God has used Rory Shiner to help me to understand the resurrection and the hope that we have in Jesus. It changed my life when I heard the talks from Rory on that topic. So I'd highly recommend that article for someone who's got a bit of spare time.
Excellent. We'll put links to those articles in the show notes so that listeners can go and follow them up. Hannah, thanks for chatting with me today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Jonathan.
The Gospel Coalition Australia exists to encourage and assist Australian Christians to remain convinced of the truth and power of the gospel, to commend and tend for the gospel in our lives and ministries, and to foster connections between individuals, churches, and other ministries so that we can most effectively advance the gospel in Australia.